Hello again, Aunt Violet. This is Antonio. This is the second of the videos, and I think there's going to be three in all. I'm going to try to keep this one much shorter than the first one, which came out very long. I hope you had the patience to sit through it, or at least watched your favorite bits. So after I left Munich, I went by train down south of Munich, about an hour and a half, towards the Alps, and I went to the village of Oberammergau, which is right at the base of the Alps. Now, I went there because when I was about 15, I read an article in the National Geographic magazine about an amazing event that happens once every 10 years in the village of Oberammergau. The entire village of around 2,000 people gathers together and performs the Passion Play. They've been doing this for almost 400 years, every 10 years. And it was scheduled in 2020, but they had to cancel because of the pandemic. But they rescheduled it for 2022, and I had tickets. So there I went. This is where I stayed in Oberammergau. This is my hotel. And this is the little terrace at the front door of my hotel. Everything was just, spring was just breaking out all over the place like crazy. These are a few pictures of what the village looks like. Very much sort of mountain architecture. Lots of charm. You'll notice the crucifix up at the top here. Because this village has had the Passion Play tradition for so long, you find a lot of religious symbols scattered around the village. This was a little antique shop, had some beautiful things. This house had a bunch of illustrations from fairy tales painted on the walls. So this is the theater in Oberammergau. I first heard about this when I read an article in the National Geographic when I was 15. Yeah, I was 15, and I read this article in the National Geographic about this village in southern Germany where every 10 years, the entire village of around 2,000 people comes out and performs the Passion Play. They've been doing this every 10 years since 1633 without ever an interruption. And I had decided when I was 15 that I had to see that someday. So it was scheduled for 2020 because of the pandemic. They postponed it to 2022, and I got my ticket and I got there. And this is the theater. The theater is an interesting building. It seats about 6,000 people by my estimate, and it's a great big room, but one wall is missing, and it's completely open to the air on one side, and on that side they have the stage. The stage does have a retractable glass roof that they can pull out to keep it from getting rained on, and they did do that for a brief while I was there, but it's still open air. The performance goes on all day long. It's a 5-hour show. It starts in the afternoon, then there's a dinner break, and then it goes on into the evening. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't take pictures during the play. They didn't allow photography during the play. I did steal a few pictures off the internet to give you a little idea, and I thought I'd at least try to describe a bit of it for you. This is a version of it from, I think, a previous year, maybe 10 years ago. So what's really interesting about it is it isn't just a play. It isn't just one piece of theater. It's really like 3 different kinds of theater all mixed together. And every 10 years, they kind of revise it a little bit. So what I saw looked slightly different than this. But basically what they've got is a chorus. So we see the chorus here standing in white robes. Now, when I saw it, the chorus was all dressed up in black and white, like the clothing of the 1600s when they first started doing the play. You might think also about Rembrandt paintings where you see, or the Pilgrims where they wear black and white. So that was how the chorus was dressed. And the chorus was singing poetry that had been written specifically for the play. They were singing it to music that was written in the early 1800s by a local composer, also wrote it specifically for the play. And the verses of the music that the chorus was singing were describing the story and describing the ideas and the emotions and what was going on. So then once they had sung a passage, then the chorus would disappear into the passageways on either side, and the actors of the play would come out. So now we are seeing actors, not singers, and they would come out onto the stage wearing clothing like they were in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. And here we see Jesus arriving in Jerusalem on the donkey. There were a lot of animals in the play. There were ducks, geese, goats, sheep, doves. There were a few horses. There was even one camel. So here we would get the episodes of the entire Passion play. We'd get them one episode at a time, and then they would do an episode, and then the chorus would come out and sing about it and sing about the next part. And then the third element of the play was really surprising and amazing to me. It was the center section of the stage which had a curtain going across. So while the story was being shown on the front part of the stage, they would create this scene behind the curtain. And then when that episode of the story was finished, everybody would leave the stage, they would open the curtain, and you would see a kind of tableau of people with a beautiful set, and it would be completely still, like it was like a nativity scene or a creche like they make at Christmas time out of dolls. The people's makeup even made them kind of look like full-size human dolls. So they would pick a moment, an incident from the Old Testament that had an echo with what was going on in the Passion play at that point, and they would create it on the stage. It might be Moses talking to the Pharaoh, or Cain and Abel, all these different things from the Old Testament. So that was the third part of the play that was really quite amazing and really beautiful. So that was the Passion play at Oberammergau. Here are a few more pictures from the area. This lovely little church tower peeks up here and there when you're walking around the village. I was walking along the river and decided I was going to have lunch at a little spot up on the hill above the village where I could see things a little better. That's where I took this picture. Here I'm climbing up to the picnic spot. And this was where I had my picnic. This was a monument that was given to the village. In 1871, the King Ludwig II of Bavaria came to Oberammergau and watched the Passion play. And then he commissioned a sculptor to create this beautiful monument as a thanks to the villagers. It was erected in 1872. It's quite high up and about 15 minutes walk outside the village, and from up here you can look down onto the village. This was a little historical plaque about it. If you want to read it, you can pause the video. From Oberammergau, I went to the next village called Ettal. I spent 2 nights in Oberammergau, and then I went to this village of Ettal, which was going to put me on the right spot for the next part of my trip. This is half of my hotel, and that's the other half of my hotel. And my room was in one of these top-story bedrooms here. Beautiful place. It was a very small village, and from my room I could look out, and this is what I'd see. Basically, this is the village on the right, and then what we have on the left is a beautiful church with a dome surrounded by a Benedictine monastery. I think that the village really sort of grew up around the base of the monastery, which was the main focus there. So I spent a night in Ettal, enjoying the magnificent view. During the night, there was a thunderstorm, and in the morning, the mountainsides were just running with water. Here's some pictures of the church. The next day, I took one of the local buses into a little valley nearby. It was only about a 15-minute bus ride to see this palace called Linderhof. It was built by King Ludwig II, the same king who built that crucifix looking out over the village. So he built this when he was quite young. He had just become king, and on this spot there had been a very traditional, old-fashioned hunting lodge, Bavarian style, like we were seeing from the houses in the village, where his father would take him and his younger brother on hunting trips into the mountains. When his father died and he became the king, he had the lodge moved about 100 yards away and then built this palace on that spot. This was the first of his several palaces, and this was his favorite one and also the smallest. The palace sits in a kind of a small valley, so there's the mountain rising up behind, which we see here, and then behind me there's another smaller hill rising up. That's the hill that rises up behind. And I'm up on that hill now looking back at the palace. If you look above the palace, you'll see a small green garden structure, a gazebo up there. We're going to get all the way up there at one point. They're doing some repair work on that upper section right now, so I couldn't go up there. If you look at this balcony, you'll see that there's an L here. That stands for Ludwig. And then he's got another one for good measure, going the opposite way, since everything has to be symmetrical. This is a garden to one side of the palace. And there I am. This is the piece that goes behind and up the hill to that gazebo up there. This is a cascade, water coming down in like a whole dozen little tiny little waterfalls coming down like that to this fountain at the bottom. And this is from inside that gazebo. Looking back, the palace is down here at the bottom, and then the hill starts to rise up again, and there's that little pavilion at the opposite end. The fountain with the mermaids we saw, that's just below these three arches. And in the garden, in the park around the garden, there are two lovely structures. One is this one, done in the sort of North African Arabic style, and it's called a tea house. And that's the balcony. Pretty amazing. You'll note, though, as exotic as it looks, it's actually built the same way as those pretty houses in Oberammergau, where they're just simple panels of wood that have been carved out with the shape. In this case, they've painted it, and that gives it a whole different character. And that's a glimpse inside the tea house. You can't actually go in. You can only look through the door. The other little building in the park is this chapel. Again, I couldn't actually go inside, but they had the door open so you could look in. Now you can see the mountains rising up behind. In the next video, I'm going to tell you about the next 2 days. I went walking off to the right, off over in this direction, where I've got the mouse circling. I spent 2 days walking through the mountains and came out at the other end. That'll be in my next video. Anyway, that's all for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, Violet. Thought of you a lot all throughout the trip. Bye-bye.